Hey guys, Frank the Pest Geek here. Well, just did my first workout of this week to the gym, and actually I'm doing good. I was able to, while I was at PMU, I basically did my workout in the gym at the hotel for a couple of days because it was grueling, man. Traveling for me is never agreed. I've never liked traveling. I've never liked going out a lot because I don't sleep well. It takes me days for my body to adjust to a new bed. The hotel I stayed in, which I knew I shouldn't have, I did it anyway. It was a 3.5-star hotel. It wasn't bad. Just the bed wasn't comfortable. They left the lights outside on all night. Light shining. I got my room in my home pitch dark. It's almost like blackout. There's no phone in there with no lights. Nothing's flashing. I need to sleep in that total darkness. And I could hear the cars because it was close to a main street. So needless to say, next time I'm going back up to PMU in 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now. It's the 20-something of February that I'm going out there for. And I'm going for the WDO class in the end of February at Pest Management University. And then I'm going back in the second week of March for the master class in termite. And then from there, I'm going over across to Deerfield Beach to the Paul J. Bello conference. So I'm going to be gone from Tuesday till Sunday afternoon. Might check out on Sunday and then drive back. But I'm only like 2 hours I'm about an hour and a half, 2 hours from Deerfield. So I'm not too far. And then I'll be driving home right after that. So it's been just a challenging week. I was able to do my yoga in the room every day. But my first night there, I go to bed. I drive from Miami. I leave here probably like at 1. I get there probably like 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I go to dinner. And then I get back to the hotel. Well, this is after I did a bed bug inspection. Tore that place apart, because I already saw silverfish in the bathroom at the office. And I said, what am I going to find in that room? So did a complete bed bug inspection. Luckily, I found nothing at all. And then I went to dinner. And then I got back and I went to probably bed around 10 o'clock. Man, I was up at 1:30 in the morning. And then I just stayed in bed struggling. I couldn't really go back to sleep. I stayed in bed struggling. I get to school the next day. It's an entire day of PowerPoint and lectures, which that's the grueling part. I'm going to tell you right now about PMU. If you got a technician that he is good and he is showing a lot of promise, even if he's new, I would invest the money and send him to PMU. I wouldn't waste my time, though, sending a guy to PMU if he's mediocre and average. He's not going to make it. If he doesn't enjoy sitting there for 8 hours a day, listening to bug information, if he's not a pest geek, but if you see it in him, you give him something to read and he reads it, he's a new guy, he's hungry, he's doing stuff, he's learning, by all means. It's going to cost you $300 something for the class, $200-300 for the hotel, couple $100 in food, and 3 days of production, 4 days of production, maybe, because he's got to leave and be able to rest and not show up that morning ready to class. So you're going to lose about 4 days worth of production. But I'll tell you what, that guy is going to come back pretty sharp, at least knowing a whole lot more than he did. But I wouldn't waste it on your C players. I have this belief, and I've been talking to people about this, and they hold on to C players way too long. I hire A and B players the moment you're a C player. And what happens when the A and B players raise the bar and you become a C player, you got to go work for somebody else. Because your organization is really only going to be as good as your weakest link. Your weakest player will bring down the morale and will bring down the organization. When everybody is stepping up to the plate, and that guy isn't. I'm talking about your A player guy and then your B player guy that just does a little bit better than average. Not asking for perfection. It's that guy that stands as a C player that he just does the bare minimum and doesn't care to do any. Sometimes he doesn't even do the bare minimum. It's a burden for him to do the bare minimum. So that's my take on it. I've been doing, I did a video this week on IPM. We're really going to start digging into IPM because I'm going to tell you right now, after 50 years, and I've been talking about this forever. I've talked to plenty of entomologists, plenty of guys at universities and gals. Had dinner with Jonovich, who is an entomologist, who is in the pest control industry, who has owned the pest control business, who owned the distribution business, and now he's doing consulting work. And we've been having a discussion about the practicality of IPM. IPM in a residential environment, if you're going to be tactical, IPM, you're going to be like, hey, it's going to be from the pyramid, from the bottom up, to where you are doing all the observations first, and then you're doing the exclusion, and you're doing the sanitation, and you're doing everything, correcting all the deficiencies, and then you're moving up that, and you're going to get to chemical last. It can't be done in a residential environment, because when the time somebody calls you on the phone, they already have a pest problem. The pest problem has been neglected because they have neglected the bottom of the pyramid all the way to the top, including using their own chemical, including using the chemical wrong and doing everything wrong. And now they're calling you, and you really have to start with a residential client from chemical down. First, we use the chemical and we control the problem. Then we look at all the sanitation and the exclusion and the mechanical trapping and all this. Now, if we're talking about insects, if we're talking about rodents, well, that's a different matter, because that's a different IPM process. The principles of IPM, but you can do trapping, and you can start controlling a rodent problem with trapping and simple exclusion, and then deal with the sanitation. What if there are no sanitation issues for rodents? There's a spigot that needs to be replaced outside. Easy fix. If you seal the holes and you've got where the rats can't get in, chances are you're done. But when you start with German roaches, or when you start with an ant problem like we have in South Florida, can you really do IPM in South Florida, a residential home environment? And the answer is no, not for residential. If you take the tactical, in other words, that you start with all the mechanical first, and you've done everything you can, then you use the chemical, you will lose that customer to your competition. That's the practical reality. I will challenge any entomologist in the world that understands South Florida. Let's just talk about South Florida, what I understand, and show me how we're going to do exclusion, prevent, and trapping and monitoring for ghost ants. It can't be done. You have to put a barrier outside of protection around that home for ghost ants. Now, indoor, we can have 100% indoor IPM service for indoor, and say we're not going to apply any chemical in here until there's actual problem if we're doing an exterior perimeter treatment around that home. I even have homes where I know they're getting in just like termites do underneath the structure, because we never see a trail. We never see a problem. We go there at any time and there's ghost ants in that kitchen. Yet I can't find a trail on the roof line, on the soffit, on a window, on a door. I can't find a trail to save my life. Is that IPM? Is getting rid of the problem indoor, sealing everything that you can, monitoring the indoor. But here's what the problem is. The customer's doing the monitoring for you. Why? Because the moment they see one ghost ant on top of their bread, they're calling you. When are you going to see that ghost ant if you go in there and there ain't no ghost ant? All the inspection in the world, chances are, isn't going to find you a ghost ant until that ghost ant makes it inside that home. So you see, there's different levels and there's different IPM. And I think that the problem with IPM, there's an article, I recommend everybody read it, The Illusion of IPM, of Integrated Pest Management. It's a scholarly article written by a university. And we got to understand that when we're thinking about IPM on a grand scale, from a laboratory to a warehouse facility, you're dealing with a different dynamic. You're dealing with a more educated client. You're dealing with a client who's done this before, understands this. When you're dealing with an airport, when you're dealing with a field, I'm looking at the studies for IPM. 70 to 75% of farms say they have instituted IPM, yet the amount of chemical use has substantially gone up every year for the last 30 years. Yes, we've gotten rid of chlorpyrifos, and we've gotten rid of a lot of carbamates and a lot of highly toxic chemicals. However, because we've probably gotten rid of those, there's a need to make more applications of pyrethroids. And now you have an increase every year in the amount of pounds that are put into the ground of pyrethroids and other chemicals. So is IPM really being effective? That's my question. Is IPM really practical for the residential pest control company, the average guy like you and me? Is it really practical? I think if we got rid of, and I can see where this is going in the industry, which I agree, if we got rid of that requirement in IPM for urban structural IPM and say chemical last, because you can't do chemical last with termites. How are you going to tell the customer until you actually find a termite chewing on your wood? We can't really put stations in the ground or something. Some states are going to allow it. Some states aren't. Are we really protecting the house with a pre-tree treat with borates? That's the questions. So I think if we remove the stipulation in IPM that it's chemical last as a last resort and only when the thresholds have been met. In other words, what is the threshold for a German roach? What is the threshold for a bedbug? One is too many for every customer that we have in a residential environment. Then you got to deal with the thought process. Well, German roaches in HUD structures. Well, how many people are actually doing that? And then the question I got to ask, is it the pest control industry's fault that the prices are down here for spray and pray in public housing? Or is it HUD's problem because HUD took a contract when they have all the entomological information in the world, knowing that you can't do an IPM job for $2.15 a unit? When I ask HUD, oh, we just don't have the money. We don't have the people. We don't have the resources. We don't have the budget. See, we can blame the industry for this. But if I submit an IPM program under an RFB for HUD on what it really takes to control that roach problem, I will never, ever in my life get a contract. So therefore, they will have no pest control. And therefore, they will continue to get spray and pray companies, and they will continue to have roaches forever. And the asthma and the allergies and the diseases in the inner city continue to be what they are. It's not the pest control industry's fault. That's HUD's fault. And when we look at residential pest control, if I remove all of the pests from your home, American roaches, German roaches, ants, and I keep them out through a barrier process, but I'm not doing IPM, what do I call it? Then we go to assessment-based pest management where we assess what we need and then we make an application. When? How do we prevent ants when we have species of ants that have mega colonies and we got to keep it back from that structure? And the only way we can do it is with a complete off and barrier treatment. Do we wait till the population goes up or we see trails going back into the house and then tell the customer, we got to make 3 visits now to get this out of your structure? Do you see the problem, folks, that we're having with IPM, where we have the academics telling us what we need to do, but there is no real guidance on how we need to do it from anybody? So when I say that I practice IPM, I do practice IPM. However, when I tell that client, okay, we're not going to apply anything. I'm just going to come here every month. I'm going to inspect your property. And I'm only going to apply something if I see something. And then I leave there. And 5 days later, I got a call back because all of a sudden, those ants started coming in. 45 days later, 90 days later. This is why I don't do quarterly services. I tell people constantly I don't do quarterly services. Is because I know I'm going to get 15 to 20% callback rates with a quarterly service. Do I charge the customer $119 a month and operate a business where I have to make every appointment with that client, and I got to tell that client, you got to be home at 3:45 in the afternoon for your appointment. You got to leave work. You commute 45 minutes to work because you live in a city. And you're going to leave work, and I'm going to make an exact time appointment in a city like Miami where I can't tell if it's going to take me 30 minutes or 45 minutes to drive, because we're going to do an assessment base on every job, every time, all the time, and I'm going to charge you $1,200 a year because I got to be in your home 30 to 45 minutes assessing. You see, it's great to teach that. It's wonderful. I totally agree with Deanie Miller. As a matter of fact, I use her protocols for German roach. I agree with you. Unfortunately, entomologists have never run pest control businesses, at least not most of them, not the ones that teach in the university. So how do I compete with every large brand in the country that is supposed to be doing this, by the way, because you are in those universities, you're teaching them, but they're all on the board of NPMA, and they're not practicing any of this. How does the little guy who has no buying power, no resources, who is a 3, 4, 5 man, 10 man company, compete with multi-billion-dollar companies on price and on service and tell the customer, yes, I know that they're charging you $120 a quarter, but to go with me, you got to really spend $120 a month because I'm going to assess and not treat anything when I get into your house unless I absolutely find a problem. Now, the percentage of people that really would want this in America is probably less than half of 1%. Because they just don't want the chemical. They're chemophobes like me who say, I don't want any chemical. I'm going to call you. See, here's the offset of that. I don't want a chemical applied every time. I'm just going to call you when I have a problem. Now I got to go in every time and still apply a chemical because I've already assessed. I've already excluded. I've already laid monitoring systems down. They don't want to pay for a service. They only want to call me when there's a problem, which makes total sense. I mean, I don't want chemotherapy if I don't have cancer. But I'm going to go to the doctor and I'm going to pay him to tell me I don't have cancer. The customer knows if he's got bugs, other than termite, because they don't know, but when he sees that roach across the floor, he's made an assessment. There's an assessment-based pest management principle going on here, folks. I'm calling Frank because I've assessed that I have a roach problem. And then we can get into Bobby Corrigan's mentality, which I 100% agree with. It's great if you're doing something in a city. If you're doing something in an airport. So let's say I am doing an assessment based on a large city. I'm going to give you an example. And I'm going to go to the city and I'm going to say, you know what? We got to change all of the trash cans in the city to one that rodents can't get into. So they can't eat the food when people leave it in there. But it only takes the garbage people to collect it, the city workers. It only takes them a minute. But because they got to take this lid off and because they got to put it on the ground and now it's snowing and now it's this and now they got to go and remove and it takes them 4 minutes. Our labor rate just went through the roof. The union gets involved and says, no, that's too complicated for our workers. It's going to slow them down. Then you're going to get on their case about them not being able to produce. They don't like it. The union doesn't like it. We're not going to do it. You did all the assessments. You did what you were supposed to do as a biology-based, an observational biology. You observed what the problem is. You know where the bottleneck is. I know a lot of business people that know where the bottleneck is. However, they don't have the capacity to make the change. to change the bottleneck. Me, I always break the next bottle and get it to flow. There are a lot of questions. I think there are too many people that live in a bubble that understand government policy, and the policy says we got to do this. However, human beings don't care about policies. When you tell me that's law, that's policy, I'm going to rebel against that by nature. I just had a home, brand new construction. I got a client. I'm going to give you an example. I got a client who's been with me for years. She is now dating somebody, and they're going to be moving in together. And he just built this brand new home. We're talking about big money here, okay? We're not talking about a little cheap home. This is brand new construction in a city that is very wealthy. And they built a home, and it has a partial crawl space. The problem with he's got American roaches. So my guy went in there and he did the assessment. He told them exactly where those roaches were coming in. But he has a contractor who built a multi-million-dollar home. And my guy is just a dumb little technician who's 24 years old who doesn't know anything. He assessed it. He showed him the pictures. I showed him the picture. He says, no, that can't be possible because this roach is that big and those holes are that small. Your nymphs are getting in and they're finding food in the house. Now, in her home, she doesn't have any bugs. That's why she wanted me to go. Now I'm going to go on Friday and I'm going to talk to her boyfriend. And I told her like this. I said, if I talk to your boyfriend and he doesn't change his mind, you got to find another pest control company because there's no way in the world I'm going to be able to satisfy you. That, my friends, is the real world we live in as pest control operators, as pest control people. We can show all the science. We can make PowerPoints. We can bring them I can quote every expert in this industry to them. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to believe you because I had a contractor who built this multi-million-dollar house and you're just a pest control guy. And this is why the industry isn't really standing behind us to educate the masses. We don't have, I wish Bobby Corrigan would have 300 videos on YouTube, but he doesn't. He's got lectures that he gives to professionals in the industry, to owners usually, not to technicians, to owners that go to conferences and then they sit on the information and do nothing with it and don't share it with their people. Because the average pest control technician is never going to go to a conference. This has been my beef with the extension service. This has been my beef with the university. This has been my beef with the state. The average technician is never going to take a rodent course from Bobby Corrigan, which he should. He's never going to hear Deanie Miller live. He's never going to sit down with dinner with Faith Oy. He's never going to sit down to have a conference, personal conference, with an entomologist. The average technician is never going to get the level of training that I am talking about on my podcast. I have given better training over a podcast than sometimes multi-million-dollar branches are giving their people. How do I know this? Because I'm doing consulting. Because I'm talking to them. Because I'm talking to the technicians in the field. They're confiding in me, say, I was working with this national brand who's on the PCT 100, on the top 10 list, and I was given 40 hours of shadowing, not 40 hours of training. I followed a technician around, saw what he did, and 40 hours later, they handed me a truck and said, you're now a technician. See, that is the sad state of our industry. So what happens with educators, yes, they have the right information. They have the right idea. They have the right motive. They've got the right heart. This is why I listen to them. However, when it comes to making an influence in the actual industry and dealing with NPMA for training technicians, there's a big problem. And why? Well, who's controlling the board of NPMA? You see, folks, I'm going to end up with a horse's head in my bed. Because I am talking about the stuff that PCT is never going to talk about the realities of how hard it is for us to do what it is they want us to do. I would be happy to partner with any university to bring programs together to take it down to the little guy so that the little guy can take all these courses, pay for it himself at an affordable price when his company isn't. Here's the other problem with that. When I was going to conferences outside of the pest control, I would come back from that conference and talk to all my bosses about everything that I've learned. And tell them, wow, this was amazing. This was wonderful. We should do some of this and do this and do that. And guess what would happen? And everybody says, Frank, go back to selling. Go back to doing what you're doing because we're not going to do anything about it. Then why the hell did you send me to a conference, spend a week, spend thousands of dollars to send me to a conference when you aren't going to do a damn thing about it? Just saying. See, folks, this is the reality of the real world. This is Frank the Pest Geek wishing you a pestacular day.